So I just wanted to give everyone a small background to this whole thing, which is that both Hari and I know each other now for the last 7 or 8 years, and we came to meet each other. It was a very interesting kind of context. First of all, I'd like to thank Alka, who's my wife, and she introduced me to Yoga Sutra, and this whole framework, and all the lovely people who've shown me a completely new dimension to looking at life. And one of the biggest things is my discovery of Mahabharata as a story, which has so many hidden insights and codes that you can look at yourself with. So today we thought we'll analyze through that framework our response to the Chandrayaan 3 landing, which happened about a couple of weeks back. Now, we also had the choice of, from time to time, doing webinars on this subject, but people don't really, we don't get the right forum or the people who are not interested in leadership development. But the moment you attach it to a topical context like this, then it increases the intrigue. It brings in a completely new set of people. So I just want to talk a little bit about this framework now. So first, I'd like to thank our guru, Raghu Anantanarayanan, whose picture you see here. And we really discovered this framework with Ritambra, which is an ashram based in Kotagiri. Raghu has been doing this human process and human condition work for the last 50 years. He's written a few brilliant books on this whole framework. He's a direct disciple of Krishnamacharya and Desikacharya. He's one of the last people to receive the entire subject of yoga directly from those illuminated souls. And then we are lucky to have got that from him. What Raghu has created is also a fabulous framework that he takes to the whole world. He's still unrelenting at 76, working probably 8 to 10 hours a day. And this specific thing called Mahabharata immersion, which we went through 7 years back. And also Hariprasad and I separately went through a program called Awakening Arjuna, the picture of which you see there. So I wanted to just acknowledge the presence of Raghu and Ritambra in our lives, and the fact that all this is coming from there. What I'll also do is give you a quick glimpse of what Epic Mirror is. It's a 1-minute film. I just want you to then understand what is the context of these Pandavās. So,
as potential leaders, each one of us has an inner theater. What plays out there are different personas, dialogues, conflicts, and resolutions. They trigger our responses to the external world, shaping who we are. How we react, act, and behave is a reflection of the drama being enacted within. To view one's inner theater, revisit one of the world's greatest stories, the Mahabharata, a mirror into the self and a journey to being the best that you can be. The 5 Pandavās are a lens into our inherent strengths, weaknesses, and patterns, for they live within us, some brothers more dominantly than others. The epic's deep insights enable everyone to rewrite their personal narratives by turning stereotypes into powerful archetypes and transforming static perspectives into fresh possibilities of heroic potential. With Epic Mirror, our unique story-based leadership training framework. Reflect, transform.
So this is a small glimpse. I'd just like to acknowledge the voice behind this film. Good friend Udalak, who passed away last October. I'm sure 3 participants in this room know about him. Tathagata, Maithili, and Nima. I'm sure you'll remember his voice. So essentially this tool, Epic Mirror, is a spin-off of the entire Mahabharata immersion framework. And it's to use one of the world's greatest story as a framework to look at our own selves, and that's really the purpose here. And I guess where this story really comes in very handy for us on an everyday basis is that when we go about our everyday lives, we evolve some patterns. We have very specific default responses. Whenever we hear something, or anyone, if there is an external stimulus, anyone says something to us, or there is an event that happens, we have a default response to it, and it's only after over time you start processing it and kind of absorbing it in a more holistic way. So that really defines our ways of being, and then it defines what we do as a response to that. And what we believe is that when we kind of get entrenched in our default responses and archetypes, they actually limit our possibilities, because we kind of become very hardwired, to use a more newer term, and we stop growing in those directions that we should really be growing. So being the framework, we also why I think this framework is very potent is because as a story, the Mahabharata is very, very popular. In fact, I've traveled now with Epic Mirror to various parts of the country over the last 3 to 4 years. Right, whether it's a farmer's son in Maharashtra who works in an IT company in Pune, or it's somebody in Chennai, or it's a person who's grown up in Haryana, where the folklore of Mahabharata is very, very alive. We are in Gurgaon, which is supposed to be Dronacharya's village. This story has kind of got penetrated into geographically in a very, in a very, very widespread area, and also across generations. I used to have a feeling that young people don't know about the story, but quite fascinated to see people who are also Gen Zs are engaging with certain characters. In fact, there was a 25-year-old engineer in Pune who told me a story about a character I didn't even know about, Ghatotkacha's son, and he said Barbarik. And I said, wow, how do you know that? He said, we have a temple in our village. So this fable has been totemized everywhere, and that's the beauty of this story. And almost everyone's grown up with this epic. And the idea is to not look at it, and that's thanks to V.R. Chopra. That's thanks to a lot of other serials. It's thanks to Devdutt Patnaik, who writes it in his own way. That's thanks to Amar Chitra Katha, which is my favorite comic series, as everyone knows. And of course, Rajagopalachari, who wrote the Mahabharata. So that's because the context is already very alive in people's heads. But the idea is not to look at this story. I know there's a lot of, Hari, there's a lot of conversation today going on, whether this is mythology or history, whether the word mythologies exists to put us down as a society. I'm not getting into that because those are our personal opinions. But fundamentally, today's purpose is to look at it as a metaphorical, base of characters that's available to us. It's a mirror. That's why I call it epic mirror. It's a framework. It's a lens, basically, which is an insight into our psyche. Because as you saw the film, all these characters reside within us, and it's not these characters alone. Because everyone might ask, "Hey, what about Draupadi? What about Karna?" They are all there. But I basically want to tell people that there are base characters and there are shadow characters, and there are several other characters who are kind of intertwined in this epic, and therefore they reside in our deeper psyche. So that's the essential assumption. And what our inner theater really has is an interplay of these multiple archetypes and personas who are constantly dialoguing with each other. When you kind of take this as your framework to look at your everyday life, you will actually see a Bhima talking to a Sahadeva. That's what is happening to me right now. But I'm sure when you start applying this framework to yourself, you'll see many other actors dialoguing with each other, and our default responses to anything are based on this conditioning and the narratives that are being shaped within and shaped over time. So what are these propensities? A quick rundown on that before we move to the moon landing, because we're already 13 minutes into this talk. So what we found and what we have experienced is that anything that makes your basic response or your way of life is to follow a rule book is essentially what we call the Yudhishthira propensity. Hari, please add to this. In fact, I'd like you to take people through these 5 propensities. So why don't you kind of chip in now?
Sure, Hari. Thanks for that elaborate introduction, because I think it's important to make that perspective shift before we engage with these archetypes. So building on that, we are looking at them not as characters. We might also, because of the popularity of Mahabharata, have a certain kind of an image of each person in our mind. So what could be helpful is to look at them as energies or tendencies in which we might respond when we engage with a certain situation or a challenge. So from that perspective, if we look at what is the archetype of Yudhishthira, and archetype here means a certain kind of an universal energy that is inherent in all of us. So Yudhishthira archetype is, as you could recall from your memories from Mahabharata, is that response which comes alive in the event of a challenge or a situation where the primary orientation seems to be around a sensitivity to the system, to the status quo, and how action is bound within the confines of the existing rules and regulations. So if I am dominated by the Yudhishthira archetype in me, my primary response to most situations would be like, for example, here, I would be thinking, should I speak while Hari is speaking, or should I wait for Hari to invite me?
No.
I'm just saying as an example.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Of the Yudhishthira. So that's
a remind me.
Yeah. So that will be my primary orientation. While wait and see, or like if I'm a participant here, if Hari had not given that intro that we will have this for the first 10 minutes, then 30 minutes, then 45 minutes, I might find it very difficult to know what is the rules of the space before I engage. So that's the Yudhishthira archetype, where there is sensitivity to the rules of the system of a space and how do I engage with it. So the primary orientation will be to maintain the status quo and to act in a way where the status quo is maintained so that there's a predictability to the actions and the outcome.
Predictability and certainty, right?
Certainty, correct.
Yeah. And Hari, should we talk about the entrenchment and the dysfunctionality that emerges as a result of it right now, or should we talk about it later?
We could look at it a little later. First, I think we can go to the functionalities of each, maybe.
Yeah.
So the second character, Bhima, the much alive and colorful character from the Mahabharata. So here, the Bhima energy in us is that part of us which is very self-aware of what is my desire, what is my wish, what am I feeling right now. And this has a very potent energy to help us to be proactive, go out into the world, create something, set up something. So a lot of, if you look around the startups, and will be filled with a lot of teams with members who have that kind of passion. If there is no rule, it doesn't really impact them much because they feel excited and they thrive on the energy of that awareness that this is something I really love. Let me figure out what to do. So there is less discomfort with having lesser rules, and perhaps having a rule-bound system for this kind of a person or a person with this dominant energy might be very uncomfortable to calibrate their responses to. And then we can come to the Nakula. The Nakula energy is that archetype where...
before we come to Nakula, one of the things that I would like to tell everyone, because I have encountered this in almost every interaction, both Nakula and Sahadeva are not very well portrayed in our stories. They are usually shown as a couple of twins who are hanging around like sidekicks. But the actual epic, which you read, when you read some more elaborate stories written by Iravati Karve or any other author, they actually describe Nakula as the healer or the Ayurvedic doctor who would heal everyone towards the end of the battle every day. So he had the physician's talent, and he also had a very humanistic approach to everybody. He was sensitive, etc. And Sahadeva was more of a data collector, more of an experimenter, more of someone who worked with knowledge. I thought, Hari, we should put this in the context before we get into the metaphors of them, because most people don't know their actual role in the Mahabharata. Over to you.
True. And that's also very prominently seen in the fact that a lot of us hear stories of Nakula and Sahadeva through our folk stories than the mainstream narratives of it. So this is the Nakula energy. If we look at it from our own inner world, is that part of us which likes to remain in the background and create the context for others to thrive. So look at any space. There will be people who are really creating that space logistically, infrastructurally, and these are the almost very good mentors or team players who like to allow the team to win, and it's not really important whether they are in the limelight or not. So they're very sensitive to others' emotion and very empathetic because of that.
So the primacy is to the others' feelings more than their own feelings.
Right.
Say unlike a Bhima who's pretty much concerned about himself. Yeah.
And so the Sahadeva energy or the archetype is the part of us which is knowledge oriented, which comes alive with curiosity about knowledge and going deep into something. So any subject matter expert of any field, if you take, they'll have a very high Sahadeva energy in them because they thrive on getting the kick out of problem solving. So when there is a challenge, they like to go engage with the challenge by collecting data, going deep into that knowledge field. And perhaps as a result of it, action orientation may not be as high as that of a Bhima dominant person, but they can really come up with scalable solutions, innovations, and things like that. So this is the overall. So if you look at it from an emotional space also, Yudhishthira might be somebody who will be dominated by logic in many ways. Bhima would be dominated by a lot of sense of passion, Viryam.
And impulse.
Yes, and of course sometimes rage. Nakula will be a lot of compassion dominant kind of energy. And with Sahadeva, it will be a lot of wonderment and curiosity will be the dominant energy. Yeah. And finally, we have the Arjuna archetype, which is, so while all the other four energies are energies which are more in the action space, where it comes in the, how do I respond at an action level to a situation? The Arjuna archetype is that part of us which allows or has the gift of helping us step back from a context to really look at what is the ground on which this response or action is taking place. And this is the part of us which can ask more fundamental questions. It's not about whether I'm rule bound, whether I'm fulfilling my wish, whether I'm maintaining harmony of the system, but it's actually asking, in doing what I'm doing, what am I really doing?
So the context, so the whole episode of Arjuna stepping back from the battlefield is actually a metaphor for saying, hey, why am I fighting this war? Because a lot of people misunderstand the story as, oh, he was a coward and he put his arms down. That was not the point. I think that a moment in the war was the thing about stepping back and looking at the 30,000 feet view, rather than revenge for Bhima or, territory for Yudhishthira. It was more about saying, hey, why is this happening at a much larger contextual level, right? So Correct. It's a questioning nature of something.
Yeah. So this is actually the energy which allows you to tap into a situational intelligence or contextual leadership kind of a space where you can really sense into what the context and ask, is this the ground on which I need to act, or should I redefine the fundamentals of my action?
So thanks for putting that context, and we'll take Q&As, etc. later. But the real Pandavās on the moon, now 20 minutes into this conversation, but I think we needed that 20 minutes to set the context, was really coming from this visual, and I have a very interesting arc in my own head about this visual, Hari. Now, the thing is, this was the visual actually released by ISRO on their Twitter feed, saying now we've landed. Okay, and there were many responses to this. Of course, millions of people, majority of people, at least ISRO did a good thing by giving one visual to share. So because I'm from advertising, I always believe in the power of spreading one asset as wide as possible, because you need to make that point. But as it spread, there were many, very interesting responses to this whole visual, and the tweets and the whole. So fundamentally, this was our first hoisting of the flag on a very important matter that we had never done this before. Of course, the Shakuni in me said, "Oh, how's the flag kind of waving because there's no wind in the moon's atmosphere. The moon has no atmosphere. So, but that was, of course, then later I figured that, I just said that because I want to put people down and take away from their sense of pride. But what's been your analysis of this, the very first set of narratives that happened on 23rd when this thing actually landed on the moon?
So I think it has been a very exciting week or weeks, last 2 weeks. And I think I was at a conference that day, but then evening I saw the mobile and it was everything was flooded. Every group was flooded with congratulations and greetings around the mission, and rightly so. I think as a country, it's a great achievement. But as with any other viral message, there were a lot of memes also which came through. So some of the memes were on one end of the spectrum extremely evoking national pride, and that I think the last mission, when it failed, there was some cartoon series which came out in New York Times or something. So there's some element of tonality of, yeah, now we got our revenge kind of a tonality to some of the responses. Some of it we are genuinely feeling a sense of pride, but there were also a lot of narratives which came through which were questioning, but we are not even solving poverty. Why should we celebrate this? And so I think it was a spectrum of responses ranging from a lot of national pride to really questioning, was this even necessary kind of a...
So let me kind of go back to our framework and say so when we talked about Bhima expanding his territory, so the fact that we were all proud and hoisted a flag was a very Bhima thing to do.
Correct.
That was the Pandava on the moon.
Right.
Saying, hey, I have now come here. Now talk to me. Now challenge me. Give me the next challenge. Right. So that is a very Bhima response that everyone had. Right. And I'm not coming into the opposite.
I think even if you notice a couple of headlines last 2 days, some of the news channels were flashing this thing that moon conquered. Next,
conquered.
We are aiming for sun. So that conquered term gave a very dissonant kind of feel. And also, I think coming from a yoga field, moon is also something like an element of nature that we often invoke with a certain sense of sanctity. So I think some of the narratives, when it comes from the Bhima energy, the terms like conquered and we are
hoisting a flag.
So yeah. Those also creates a certain sense of are we now making this as another part of it has a very colonizing kind of energy to it, which is not very comfortable. Yeah.
Like what you're saying is we are colonizing the moon, that kind of thing.
But it's also conquer. Why should we conquer?
Yeah. No, but that's and Maithili, my friend, is actually put out a beautiful message there saying for her, the fascination was about the team at ISRO, the shared purpose, their journey, their ups and downs in the process, their friendships that they would have forged within the camaraderie, their memories, and what an important character shaping this project must have been and what they helped the entire country experience. Maithili, you're absolutely correct. In fact, if you look at the people who are sitting in ISRO silently, the back-end work, who are they? Hari, they are the Sahdevas, right?
Of course.
They are the ones, building these things from abstractions and from ideas, and they are not in the front, but they also need Bhimas to say this. Because, I was looking at the ISRO achievements. There have been about 127 space explorations ever since, I think in the last 10 years alone, even in the previous government. And fundamentally, they weren't getting talked about because now even a smaller expedition like Aditya gets talked about. But I think that the silent Sahdeva was not getting acknowledgement. This was actually a very big kind of culmination of that response. And revenge also is a very Bhima thing. If you know, in the entire story, it was ultimately about avenging, the insult that was done to Draupadi, and then I think this is a pretty interesting kind of texture that it takes, right?
No, I actually resonate with what Maithili and Ashok is sharing in the chat, that it is a unique success, and there is that sense of conquering of fear or doubt about this thing. In fact, one of my schoolmates is part of the ISRO team of scientists, and our school groups were flooded with congrats. And so part of me was also, his response was, it was completely teamwork, and this one line and that was it. So when you say the Sahadeva Nakula kind of a response, I think the scientists who actually worked on it are predominantly holding that energy where they would like to create a context for the nation to progress, and that's it. But perhaps when it comes to the larger social media and other things, a lot of other also get added to the story.
Yeah, because there is a bunch of us who are not the scientists, but you're waiting for that event to happen.
Correct.
Then I move to my favorite topic, which is, of course, naming it Shiv Shakti point. Of course, I'm not going to stay on this one because this is a highly controversial subject. But, even the fact that someone like a Sadhguru, who's otherwise, in the area of philosophy and spirituality and all of that, has also made a point. And then this was a very large thing trending, which is that it shouldn't, good that we didn't name it Gandhi and Nehru, we named it Shiv Shakti, etc. So, but yeah, this is again coming from that whole revenge aspect of having been suppressed for a very long time. I'm not subscribing to this, but fundamentally this was also seen. But I don't think not a single person, scientist in that control room was actually thinking about that at that point in time, or they even had the power to name it. But fundamentally, this is the direction in which this whole conversation goes. And if you look at our potentially next Prime Minister, Jaishankar, he's also talked about the international seat on the table that we got in international forums. That was a very legitimizing experience, Hari. So what do you have to say about the most important character that everyone somewhere deeply resonates with, who's constantly looking for legitimacy in the Mahabharata?
So I think you are hinting at the Karna archetype, which is in a way, a polarity when you look at Arjuna. So the Karna archetype in Mahabharata is the part of us which, having experienced a certain sense of letdown, after knowing that I do have the merit, I do have the ability, not being given opportunity by the context, it does create a sense of victimhood and a certain kind of energy that can achieve great things. But at the same time, the anchorage could be from a sense of rage of the victim. Now,
or a victimhood, yeah.
Victimhood. So I think if I were to just add on to what you were sharing about the Shiv Shakti naming and the narrative that is emerging in the larger context, I think if you look at the history of ISRO itself, with the Nambinarayanan case and other things, this is an institution which might have undergone a lot of sabotage attempts and lot
possible
of from world over in different ways. And
as we can see in some movies now that are being made.
Correct. And also the way Kalam used to describe about his days early on and everything. So everybody knows that they did struggle a lot. Perhaps they never got the resources they really needed to create what they aimed for. And so there is a possibility that a lot of the narrative also carries some of that energy of
in fact, I wanted to actually put that picture, but I lost it. That what was trending was also from a cycle to the that huge rocket, which was, I think, a fabulous representation of, hey, what I was struggling with, what you just said, that I was abandoned like Karna, and I was put away in a corner somewhere, and I was doing everything I could do. It had a lot of Ekalavya also for me, distant, far away, but taking a little thing on a cycle carrier to a large spacecraft. That contrast was also being trending, which was also from somewhere.
I remember during my school days when we had that assignment to write news headlines, and because coming from Kerala, we had a launch point there called Tumba. So there are a lot of times we used to have these headlines. The rocket launched from Tumba fell into Arabian Sea or Bay of Bengal. And I remember there were also these memes and comedy shows around these failures. So now, as a child, I think all of us took fun on that. But I think today, when you look at what could have been an impact on these people, obviously they would have felt. So I'm just seeing that part of it could also have been, as you said, created a certain sense of doing it all by myself without support, the Ekalavya energy and the Karna energy, and
which makes the victory more sweeter.
Yeah.
And of course, there was also this whole thing about how the world was watching us, and some really good tight slap on the faces of several people who are commenting on whether we needed more toilets or whether we needed this expedition. This was a very important narrative, which is that, this is the whataboutery that happens when we achieve something, saying, hey, but someone is pointing you at your inadequacy more than your capability, right?
This can also be a shadow of the Sahadeva. Sometimes when as a nation or people are anchored in a certain feeling, in this case, elation of a certain achievement, a dysfunctional Sahadeva energy can also bring up data from a lot of other things and say that, but what about this kind of things? Because you can't really match the emotional part. So data
they pull you down. So in fact, on this topic, I just wanted to take your point of view, because in the epic, as you read it, when each person was pitted against other in the last battle, I heard that Sahadeva is the one who kills Shakuni, right? And if you look at Shakuni's character arc through the story, he was the one who had all the knowledge about how the dice was going to be rolled. So he was more a metaphor for bad intelligence, and Sahadeva was metaphor for good intelligence. So this whole trumping of the story of like how good intelligence wins over bad intelligence is the metaphor for Sahadeva killing Shakuni, right? So the fact that we can't deny that India is poor, as India's poverty levels are high because we are 1.5 billion people, we can't help that. But the fact is there are two facts, but pointing to another fact, while one fact is being celebrated, is a very Shakuni thing to do, right? Is that what you're saying? Or is a shadow Sahadeva thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at Shakuni also, I don't look at him as a completely villain kind of a thing. Shakuni had a gift of being strategic and spinning things, which he did, but that's where the contextual intelligence was lacking. So it ended up being on the adharmic side. So in a way, Sahadeva's growth is also when he is able to own up to that shadow. So there's a saying now, you don't have to be naive just because you want to be innocent. So Sahadeva knew how everything will pan out. Still, he never stated anything because he was so rooted in dharma. That's what's being said. But I agree with you here. I think in a way, juxtaposing a different set of things just to counter a narrative or a certain feeling of joy somebody's experiencing is also perhaps a shadow, because each archetype has a unique way of engaging with conflict. While how we shared earlier about the Bhima's energy of vengeance can really be coming from an emotional space, Sahadeva's energy of a conflict tackling comes from citing numbers and data of something. Yeah.
And the fact to say that, hey, before you celebrate too much, also look at me, because it's because of me that you did it.
Correct. Right? True.
Yeah. Then I come to some tweets, and Maithili, this will probably make this whole session more holistic, because you said that you actually pretty much summed up everything in this, what you said in your chat. But fundamentally, here is a tweet which was also trending, but not as much, where somebody summed it up saying, hey, what have we really achieved thanks to Chandrayaan? Whether we've been able to put together an example or an instance of having clear objectives, putting out a very clear vision, persevering, innovating, working together, the thrill of exploration, which is a very Bhima thing, pride and aspiration. So he's kind of summed up almost every Pandavas motivating factor in this whole thing. And I think this was pretty wholesome in a sense, that anybody who would have wanted to look at a more 360 way of how people have responded. There were many conversations like this also going on, right, Hari?
Yeah. And I think having this in looking at it together is very important, because what often happens in most contexts, or even for ourselves in our life, is we tend to value some of these energies are more heroic or more functional, and we tend to ignore the other. So I think in a way, if you look at it in this manner, it's also pointing us to the fact that all of these energies has its heroic potential. But where am I getting limited by getting entrenched in something? How is it not helping me go beyond a particular threshold? I think that is something worth exploring for each of us.
That's great. And then there was this another one which I actually found in the morning, which is but these are these were not trending that much because the frenzy died down. See, the tragedy about operating in a large universe is that the trends always get dominated by numbers. But there were people who were actually keen to explore more about, hey, what is this really going to do? Where there was an authentic sense of curiosity. Why should we figure out whether there is water on the moon? Or why should that rover be there for 14 days and take that data? What will we do with that data? And there was some pieces of information like that which were there, but the engagement with those pieces were very little. That could just be my feed. But if I just overall kind of look at it, if I just search that, you will see the proportion of it. It'll almost like an inverted pyramid. But this was a real authentic Sadeva moment for me, saying without the shadow, saying what is it really going to do after landing? And there were many people engaging with that without a rhetorical viewpoint, saying, oh, let me see now how you will help the poor farmer. It wasn't that. It was genuine exploration. And I think, what do you think about this? Because this was, I think, a very good post that, in fact, I found from Raghu's feed, which was someone who summed up every wrong to make a right, which was all about saying, okay, things have happened. We had risk of failure, but this was a very good way of summing it up. But it was also kind of, and this is where I come to the hero's journey, where it was also setting a rule book for the future, right? So do you see a little bit of Yudhishthira in this kind of a response?
Yeah, I think I see a combination, but definitely it requires a mission of this nature. Requires a lot of Yudhishthira energy, because there's a lot of precision needed, predictability needed. I remember one of the reports cited that when this descent was happening, they said that even if these things go wrong, it will land. So to have that kind of certainty and predictability, you should have a very high Yudhishthira caliber to tune it up and set it up in that manner. And of course, this comes on the top of a failure in 2019. So definitely there has been a lot of...
The stakes were high.
Yeah, a lot of application of Yudhishthira energy from a learning perspective. Or what went wrong? What could we predict last time? How could we build in more certainty, more predictability when we go in for this time? So I think you're right. There's a lot of Yudhishthira energy into it. But of course, in terms of its application, it may also have a lot of Sahadeva energy, because you may have to innovate on certain things and to come up with solutions. And that at this scale of economy. Yeah.
It's interesting you say this, that it was on the back of a previous failure. So that takes me back to the episode of the gambling situation that happened. And Yudhishthira loved gambling. If you remember, he didn't listen to Sadeva. And I think this was a classic improvisation on the Mahabharata episode of saying he gambled. Perhaps we gambled the last time. Perhaps it was a gamble. We could have won. And we had won in the past. But it went down and we were shamed. And then this time around, Yudhishthira collaborating with Sadeva, put in more boundaries, but boundaries based on knowledge, and then gambled again, because Yudhishthira is compulsive gambler, that is one of the biggest chinks in his armor, which is that he can't, that's what is there in the epic. And yeah, gambling is a very good, but then it was a more informed speculation, I would say, that we did. by putting those boundaries.
So I think one of the ways we can also look at that gambling chapter is because of Yudhishthira's so much of rule boundedness, he was often not, or that energy often do not look at what is their own desires. And this gambling is, and anything that you suppress gets the compulsive. And so the entire Ajnatavas episode in Mahabharata is where each character, each of these archetypes explores their shadow side. So in a way, the fact that this mission came after 4 years or so, we can say that maybe all the scientists went back to their Ajnatavas, away from the world, worked on it again, and then came back with a successful model after that.
No, that's interesting that you say that, because Alka is here telling me that the way we see ISRO as a whole in the last 8 to 10 years has been a bhima, where they are ready to show to the world what they are doing. So it was really a contradiction. Really, on one end is an Agyatavas where they went in and figured out what really to do. But on the other hand, a lot has been spoken about them from the outside of putting it out. So that's a brilliant kind of contrast of metaphors. So I'll quickly now, we are at 10:45. I'm now going to open the room and for conversations. If people would want to talk, and I'm really grateful to everyone who has participated in the chat. Now is the time to converse, but I think Hari and I will request each person to come one by one in a round so that we save time. But I'll just sum it up by saying that being Yudhishthira is not bad. It is ensuring obedience and order, protecting the system from uncertainty and chaos. Being impulsive and sometimes having a little bit of rage and passion is not bad at all, because establishing territory and expanding it, protecting the society's vulnerability is important. That's critical. Being a Nakula is absolutely important, because these are the things that will help us ensure that the system is human and system is collaborative. Sadeva is important because he's the builder of knowledge, and he protects the need to know and engaging the fear of unknown. And of course, Arjun, who is essentially constantly questioning, stepping back and questioning, not like a doubting Thomas, but actually a constructive questioner who ensures there's a greater space for accommodating everybody's needs and differences, and there is coherence. So what I'll now do, and therefore this, Maithili, I'm coming to the point you made. Actually, there is no 6th Pandava. Arjuna is that 5th Pandava who recalibrates the entire context by bringing everybody's things into the fore. And that is what I felt was the healthy coexistence of not condemning anything, but also not getting entrenched in those narratives is what each one of us are achieving to do, which is why we are all seeking transformation. So on that note, my only request is if we can have show of hands, and I'll call out people one by one by alphabetical order. So that's Arunabh Mitra. Go ahead, Arunabh. You can also show hands on the reaction emoticon in case I don't see your video. And then we'll go to Ashok Iyer. Arunabh, over to you. Yeah.
Hi, Arunabh. Nice to see you here.
Yeah, likewise, Alka, and thank you for, getting Shuchi, Ashok sir, and myself on this. I saw your post yesterday and immediately enrolled.
Thank you.
So Hari and Hari, sorry. Brilliant lens through which you have showed this whole thing. I have, just in the interest of time, I just have 2 or 3 observations to make. One is, I have never personally tried to look at the world through the lens which you have just put across. And at a personal level, I'm very, very intrigued. And at some point in time, maybe through Alka, I'd like to know more about the work which Hari and Hari are doing for my own learning and growth. Yeah, so that's point one. And the fact that it's connected to yoga, etc., which Hari mentioned in the beginning, makes it more meaningful for me and my personal journey. That's point one. Point two, Hari, is that the way you've portrayed this or captured this is that it seems like everybody has a little bit of, these archetypes in it. And I think sometimes we don't acknowledge it, sometimes, and most of the times we don't accept it. Like you said something at the end, like don't condemn any of the archetypes, at the same time don't get entrenched. How does one do that successfully without judging himself or without falling into the trap of being righteous or over tough on oneself? Or is something I'd like to know more about at some point in time, maybe Alka through your Hari. Because I do fall into that trap myself, and hence I want to kind of clean my lenses, if you will. The third one, Hari, is while you were putting each and every, the tweet or whatever, I agree with all the observations which you made. The only thing, and this is not a disagreement, this is more an observation, is that some of those tweets were spontaneous. The person concerned was just saying what he or she wanted to, whereas some of them were guarded. They were not spontaneous. Like if I am the chairman of a large organization, it's more important for me to sound right rather than express myself. So there, I think the archetypes are not as real as what they probably are. And that's my only thing which kind of struck me, But if we leave that dimension aside, I have nothing but appreciation for everything that you actually walked us through in the last 40 minutes. Thank you so much. Gratitude.
Thanks, Arunabh. Ashok, would you like to say something? You had raised your hand.
Can I just add one thing to Arunabh's share?
Yeah, sure.
So I think what you shared is very important, Arunabh, because it also indicates how when we have a role boundary, a different archetypal energy gets evoked, which is very appropriate. So what Hari was earlier in the end sharing was also, do we really experience that choicefulness?
What fullness?
Do we always experience that choicefulness?
Okay.
We also have CEOs of companies who might make very emotional statements which can impact the company and the system, no?
Right.
Not everybody has that boundary.
So,
sensitivity.
as Maitri just said, isn't saying the right thing a part of Yudhishthira response? Absolutely correct. Saying the right thing, guarded thing, going by the rule book, asking the PR manager, hey, what is the protocol, is a very Yudhishthira thing to do.
I would also say that the CEO acts from an Arjuna aspect because he has to keep in mind all the energies. Hence, his space and what he responds has to be very universal in the sense that is it acceptable or mostly acceptable by all kinds of archetype people.
Right.
So from a CEO, he has to also see that passion and the aggression of his people, the brand, the process, the rule book that drives the company, the people who work there, how care they are. So whatever words he says can backlash on him, his people, his brand, his product.
Or motivate his people. Like a lot of startup companies, and Ashneer Grover will have a very Bhima kind of response.
Exactly.
So you're
hence
correct.
In choosing the CEO, or when a CEO person becomes a CEO, he brings in his own energy, but at the same time, he also has to see the balancing energy, which is
the Arjuna in him has said, okay, right now let Yudhishthira speak. There may be a situation where you may want Bhima to speak. Right? So yeah. I think we should let Ashok talk now, Hari, because we are with only 5 minutes, I think, in the call. 8 minutes. Ashok, over to you, sir. You're on mute. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Hari. First of all, I'd like to thank Alka for having provided the last-minute link because I was unable to get into this conversation. Nice to see Arunabh. Shuchi is also there. So we're all part of another group. First, congratulations on bringing about a new concept. I must confess that I am not in a position to argue the subject the way you are doing it currently in a very expert-like manner, the Arjuna in you or the Yudhishthira in you. But I think what it brings to me is some substance over which I need to reflect. I need to internalize the concepts and then come out with application. I, at this point of time, must confess also that there is a very similar theory by a Stanford professor under something called positive intelligence, where he talked about the saints and the saboteurs within us and describing the behavior from their standpoint. So he has talked about the judge, the victim mindset, and so on and so forth. But very similar. But looking at it from the Chandrayaan the perspective, the success is so huge. And having grown up over several decades as a student in the 70s onwards, the gratefulness to the USSR is uppermost in my mind. And also the Nari Shakti of Indira Gandhi for having supported. She was the first one to come forward. During her time, Rakesh Sharma had gone on as a cosmonaut on a US spaceship. A lot of confidence was reposed in ISRO. So I don't see that in any of the shares, as Arnab mentioned, on the tweets or Facebook or whatever. Quite a lot of it could have been impulsive. Quite a lot of it could have been based on a position that somebody has, as he has so articulately put. But going forward, I think we are slowly moving from a scarcity mindset as a nation to an abundance mindset. So we are talking about so many things. You brought in the knowledge aspect. So perhaps the knowledge is in one of the characters of the Mahabharata, and the fact that we are no less than anyone else, and we are growing. We need to reflect more. We need to reform. We need to perform, and we need to transform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashok. Absolutely, you're right. I personally, for that matter, keep looking at Mrs. Gandhi's stamps and USSR, our allegiance to them, and our space exploration could never have been, which is why I'm saying you need to reflect back on the last 50 years of space exploration, not just the 10. You're absolutely, but we know there are many other factors right now which are at play, where only we choose to focus on the last 10 years. I'm not getting into that right now because that's a very hot topic, and I usually get into trouble opening my mouth on that. So, Sini, you have the point. You have a point to make. Go ahead, please. Unmute yourself.
Very good morning. I just wanted to add a question. Mine is completely different from the others. Like, firstly, I want to thank you for me being on this platform. It was really an interesting and intriguing topic. What I want to add is like you have got all the characters as with all the pointers, like how the behavioral patterns and all. I just wanted to ask one question, is like why you did not involve Krishna, because he was a Sarthi. Maybe it might be a dumb question, but it was in my mind, like when it was a Mahabharata, because see, even I am new to this concept and I'm not much into Mahabharata thing, that I was in the back of my mind. It was like when you got up Karna, why was not Krishna been involved? Because Krishna was always a Sarthi to Arjuna. So he could also add it with the moon landing mission and all. Somewhere we could have included his point of view also. I thought so.
So thank you, Sini. With two Haris in the room, you still missed Krishna. I thought you wouldn't.
No.
So I'll tell you. So the metaphor, and Hariprasad, please expand on this. When we learnt about these metaphors, Krishna, we all had this question. And I think the fundamental thing is Krishna is not a human character. He is seen, so he represents the deeper intelligence that we access. We are accessing that deeper intelligence. When Arjun is in question, he goes into that deep space, and the word Krishna is indigo, deep indigo. Go into that very contemplative zone of not listening to my brain, because there is a deeper intelligence that resides in me that I have to look within. Most of us don't look at that at all. We don't take out the time and the shantam and the equanimity to do that, which is why Krishna, although he's been represented as a human character, the metaphor is not a human. You are accessing your own Krishna within. Even within the story, Krishna actually says that even Duryodhana had access to Krishna. He never accessed it. So many people had access to Krishna. Even the Pandavas had access to Krishna, but only Draupadi accessed Krishna when she called him out, but nobody called out when they were in trouble. So that's my learned understanding of the metaphor of Krishna, not as another human character. Hari, what's your view on that?
On a lighter note, I think Krishnan was also on the screen, but only Hari was seen. but I agree. I think it's when you are in the Arjuna space within, where you are able to be anchored in equanimity, Shantam, and you're able to ask fundamental questions to yourself, the intelligence that you receive or hear or see is the voice of the Krishna. So it's not an action propensity, or it is not an energy of that nature. And that's also the difference. If you look at Karna and Arjuna as the polarities, the differences from ability standpoint, both seem to be equals.
Equal.
But if you look at it from an inner work perspective, Arjuna could really question and not get entrenched in the victimhood and ask fundamental questions in spite of his privileges. And the presence of Krishna answers that. Whereas,
which is why he was the Sarathi, which is why he was riding his horse. He let him ride his car,
Right.
chariot. Alka, you want to expand on it from a yoga lens?
I think Hariprasad has explained it very well. But just to add to that, I would say that Krishna sets in all of us. It's only how we are on that journey and path to find our own Krishna. So you can say he's the consciousness, you can say he's my reality. And the whole path of yoga is to be in touch with that Krishna so that you can do what you have to do without residues, positive and negative. And that's what Krishna, the intelligence and the consciousness, tells us. So yes, this is a path, and everybody has to do their practice. That comes from a yoga teacher. And Hariprasad, also being a fellow yoga therapist with me, he also talks the same language. And so all of us have to find our own Krishna. And our Krishna is unique to self. So the whole path of yoga is to find that so that he's always there with you. So if we look at from the story perspective, Krishna was there for everyone. As children, we would say that why is Krishna helping Duryodhana? Why is Krishna helping the bad side people?
Balrama and all of them.
Yeah, but the reality is, he is there for everyone. We have to call him. And as Hari said, that we have to call him the way properly with 100% reverence and blah, blah, blah. And then only he'll come. Any lack of percentage there, he will not come.
In fact, in the actual story, both Arjuna and Duryodhana comes at the same time to Krishna to ask for help. So Duryodhana is offered to ask first. He says, I need the army. Arjuna says, I need Krishna.
So Nima, you have a question.
Yeah, look, first of all, apologies. I'm no expert on the subject. My knowledge is all from Amar Chitakatha. Yeah, and the serial and some under reading. But while we're all talking about individual archetypes and individual characters, yeah. But for me, as watching from a distance, I find a very strong similarity between the journey of the Pandavas itself, the five guys, sorry, and the lady and ISRO itself, right? There is a gamble. Space travel is a gamble. Everything is a gamble, and you fail, and you're ridiculed, yeah, and you're sent away and forgotten, and finally years later, the success. But there is, instead of looking at individual traits, but there is a common trait among all the brothers, and that's sheer perseverance, right? We look at pride, we look at revenge and all that, but all of them have perseverance. Yeah? So it takes 4-5 different kind of characters to stick together for 30 years and not kill each other in that time, and still go through all that stuff, and just like the guys at ISRO, I think, right? So in this current day and age where we don't any any form of failure, any scale of failure is ridiculed, especially with the youngsters today. Even in the work we do. And Hari and I have had discussions about this at work. I'm also advertising. Failure is no longer celebrated. So I thought there was an opportunity for the media to celebrate perseverance. But
That's
it
true.
all, it all became this rara chest beating. We have conquered the. So that's how I see it. But after the story of perseverance would have been, would have been a great celebration of the entire nation, everybody, and just that. So, anyways, I don't know whether I'm off topic, I guess, but yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that's what we were saying. Once this frenzy dies down, it shouldn't die down. Some narrative should be kept alive, and stories of perseverance should be told. And the metaphor of ISRO and Pandavās is fabulous. I think we should make a movie on that. Tathagata, first of all, belated happy birthday. Please come in and share your valuable pearls of wisdom.
Yeah, so I think first of all, a big thank you to everyone for organizing this. I have got an observation, which is, see, Pandavas are not normally referred in isolation. Of course, they have different episodes around them, but normally they're referred as the Pancha Pandav, which means that they are a collective. It's like those five fingers in your hand, and together when they come, the magic happens, a lot of problems get solved. So first question is that, is there an archetype which is a collection of all the Pandavas, those values that come together and that become a sixth archetype? That's that. Secondly, I just wanted to refer to a similar concept. I saw the movie called The Fifth Element, where essentially if you look at the four elements, which is air, water, fire, and earth, and then there is the fifth element, which is called the quintessence in that science fiction film, which is actually the sum total of all the knowledge and consciousness. And that drives the four elements, and that creates that energy. So I am just asking whether is there a sixth archetype you have thought of, or it can be applied anywhere?
So I'll go for that. So Tathagat, the best part is these five characters, I'll come to the sixth one later, and the elements you spoke of are absolutely directly connected in the Mahabharata, because these are five sons of the five elements. So Bhima is Vayu's son, Arjuna is Indra's son, and all of that. So we see those elements being represented. So if you look at Dharma is coming from Dharti, which is earth. And earth standing solidly and to kind of conform to the rules of gravity is Yudhishthira, saying, I will just stand here. And therefore, so each of these elements in nature are connected to each Pandava. We know that. The beautiful part is that there is also the spectrum, the Indradhanush, and Indra's son is Arjuna. And if you look at the queer movement today, which is represented by a rainbow, Arjuna also was queer in a significant part of the story when he questioned his own gender, if you remember. So there are these beautiful analogies. We can sit and have a whole day on this, and we can keep discovering nuggets which are amazing. But yeah, there is a very deep this thing. There is no sixth Pandava. Actually, technically the sixth Pandava is Karna, because he was the first Pandava, because he was born to Kunti. But when they say Pancha Pandava, and then you have this concept of Panchabhuta in our philosophy. Then the whole thing about Arjuna being that culmination of the four, being the fifth is how I really look at it. Hari, would you have any other insights on it? Because I haven't heard of the sixth element.
So the way I look at it, almost every character depicted in Mahabharata has an archetypal import. The major characters, not everything. So the way to look at it from a inner work perspective, if we look at it as a mirror, is look at it, what does it evoke in me? So if I am not able to touch the Arjuna in me, but I can easily touch the Karna in me, I think what is a meaningful step of engagement for me will be to look at what practices can help me transform the Karna in me to enable the Arjuna in me. So that, as Hari earlier shared, when the context demands a Yudhishthira response, I'm able to bring out that response. When the context demands the Bhima energy to create something, I'm able to tap into that energy in me. So I think keeping it in that respect will help us to not get very cognitive about the numbers and other technical details, because that's when it becomes a mirror, because anything that I see is reflecting something within me. So that's how I would
So
look.
in fact, Tathagat, not that I want to look at you with a stereotypical lens, but since you are inherently evoking a Sahadeva in you all the time, you've been a planner all your life, you've been a deep thinker. From our interactions, I can make out. So even the way you have internalized this is to find an answer to a very abstract question, saying, hey, there could be a sixth one. You've assimilated so many different points of reference and data and presented this question, which is the Sahadeva in you.
So that curiosity is the Sahadeva energy.
That's right. So that to Nima's point, Nima, I get what you're saying. I wanted to just elaborate on that. I think time will tell whether as a society we move on from the initial celebration and frenzy and sustain this awareness about ISRO. That is my fear also, that this whole fanfare will happen and we will just forget about it till the next failure. And when the failure comes, we will come again like Karna and deeply entrench ourselves in a victim narrative. That is what makes the entire society dysfunctional. We stand the risk of being a very dysfunctional society. See, I know for elections, you need to get majority. So you will chest thump, you will do a lot of, Bhima has to do a lot of things. He has to evoke energy, rage. These things happen. In every country, it happens. No one is perfect. But to be entrenched there all the time makes us a Duryodhana, makes us a Karna. And that will not lead us anywhere. And your fear is the fear that I share, that 2 months later, a new movie will come. And then the same people who are chest thumping for Chandrayaan will start telling, talking about the movie more than space exploration. So I really hope that as society, all this thing about spreading awareness about space exploration is a good thing, because it's only these mass things that create awareness about these things. Otherwise, it can be in a niche and in a very snobbish kind of area where no one will know about it. But the trick is for somebody in this entire game to sustain the intelligent conversations around it. And that Arjuna needs to keep coming back again and again and saying, hey, is your celebration really important 1 month later? No. Now what is important is what are the outcomes of it. So the Sahadeva has to stand up. The Bhima has to sit down. I hope I have answered your question. And the jury is really out on that. Time will tell.
Just last thing to add to that, Hari. I think with big events like this, the larger response always tend to stop at the emotional thing for a shorter duration. So if we are to look at as a society how we can learn from this for ourselves, I think for a more meaningful response, one thing I can see for myself is looking at how, like we shared earlier in the session, ISRO itself had a great combo of Yudhishthira, Sahadeva, Bhima, Nakula energies, which ended up creating this kind of a achievement. Maybe I can learn from it and ask myself, in my life, in my organization, in my context, which energy is lacking? How can I learn from this achievement and bring it back to myself and work? So if I feel that today I'm very entrenched in my Bhima, can I take steps to nurture the Sahadeva in me? I think if each of us can do that, perhaps more and more meaningful responses can also show up in the future.
Yeah. So I hope we have answered everybody's queries, and we are all personally connected. So happy to do another session like this. The biggest screw up is that I forgot to record this session, Hari. So, because
I'm recording.
Oh, you're recording it?
It was recorded.
Yeah. I started recording.
Recorded.
Oh, great. So let's thankfully, so we'll mail this to everybody. Thanks Nima, thanks Maithili, thanks Sini, thanks Ashok, thanks Aruna, thanks Tathagat, thanks Shuchi, thanks Hari, thanks Alka. We had a good session.
Hari. I just have a
Maithili.
parting thought which I wanted to share with everybody. So I happen to be a student of the Kathak Padma Shri awardee Guru Shobna Narayan.
Wow.
And and she has done a lot of research. Plus, she has done many shows internationally and in India. Just about less than a week ago, there was a show done by a student of hers from Vietnam, which was about it was a Draupadi's perspective. and it was called Yajna Seni. So the one who's born out of fire. So she actually does a lot of women-centric things. It was about women empowerment. So I'm definitely I think this discussion has been absolutely very, very beautiful in a different perspective. So I'm going to take this discussion to her and, maybe give you a feedback based on that. Yeah.
Suji, that will be great, because in our group, we had a lady from, I think her name is Renuka. She had done this whole episode while we were at the Learning Theatre on the Draupadi's shaming and about the significance of the unlimited sari and Krishna. It was a beautiful episode. And I think Natya Shastra it's called the fifth Veda, and you are already into that. And we would love to engage with you and know more about Shobhana ji's work.
I actually got a bit late. She is in Vienna. Shobhana ji is in Vienna right now. So otherwise I would have, this time probably may not have really suited her. Otherwise, if I had told her a little bit in advance, perhaps she would have also loved to have joined this. Anyhow, I'll send her the recording if you share it.
It will be an honor, because she's an icon. We all grew up watching her on Doordarshan.
Absolutely.
And we'd love to be kind of exposed to her. And when you guys are in Delhi, we can meet her in person also.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maithili, you want to unmute yourself and say something? It's so nice to see you after so long. All your hair has gone white. Last time you still had some remnants of dark hair.
No, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I had a question which Hariprasad answered before I could ask, which was how to use. Okay, this gives a deeper understanding and a perspective, but how to use it. So I think his answer in the larger context was practices. See, this reminded me of a lot of my own work on chakras. And the fundamental Indian psychological belief is balance. You shouldn't be either under or over on any one aspect. And to develop each of those, there are practices and affirmations and whatever. So I think I got that answer. Thank you. It was...
In fact, Maithili, we must... at some point of time, fix some time and talk. The brand chakra framework, what you've developed for JWT.
Yeah.
Also, these archetypes of Pandavās are also very fertile ground. I have tried to use them in some of my presentations.
Yeah.
So it's a very versatile situation. And someday we'll have one separate session for a branding community. We'll bring back the chakras and this whole framework together.
I think this beyond just a deeper understanding and interesting perspective, how do you put it to
apply? Yes.
Apply it to useful in a useful way.
Outcomes.
Not
for
personal.
outcomes.
Of course, personally, it's deeply useful. I'm just saying in a...
Yeah, in a way, it establishes an outcome rather than just being a observation.
For people in business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm glad I came. I've been following you for a long time. I thought, let me...
That's so nice. That's so nice of you. I think this is the way I will also bring back talking to old friends. It's an interesting way, and we can always talk in newer contexts, Otherwise, we usually end up talking about the same old things, but this is great. So great. It's 11:15. All of you people have hung around. Thank you so much. Would like to express deep gratitude, and we will do more of this. And I will keep sending you invites for these kind of sessions, at least once a month, I promise. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant, and lovely to have invited us. Hi, Alka, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.